900 years of peace ended with a sound no one took seriously enough. A single gunshot. It cracked through the grand treaty hall of Karset Prime, sharp, ugly, and painfully small for something that would rewrite the fate of the galaxy. No thunder of artillery. No orbital bombardment. Just the bark of an Imperial pulse rifle, discharged by a bored guard who had been born into a universe where humans were a footnote, and peace was assumed to be permanent. General Mara Cade staggered. For half a heartbeat, the room didn't understand what it was seeing. Then she fell. Her ceremonial coat, midnight blue, stitched with the quiet symbols of 9 centuries of restraint, darkened as blood spread across the polished obsidian floor. The sound her body made when it hit echoed far louder than the gunshot itself. It echoed because the hall had never been built for death. It had been built for speeches, for posturing, for the smug belief that history had ended. Mara Cade had ruined that belief simply by dying. She had been standing alone at the center of the chamber, unarmed as treaty law demanded, hands clasped behind her back in the old Terran military posture. Her expression, frozen forever now, still held that faint, infuriating smile she used whenever the Galactic Empire tried to talk down to her. The alien delegates froze in place. Mandibles clicked without sound. Frills stiffened. Multi-lensed eyes dilated in horror and disbelief. Several species instinctively backed away, as if the blood pooling beneath the human general might leap up and attack them. The Imperial Guard who fired the shots stared at his rifle. I thought, he stammered in broken trade cant. It was ceremonial. Someone laughed. It was a short, nervous sound, an aristocratic titter from the Imperial observation dais. A young noble, jeweled crest glinting beneath the chamber lights, leaned toward his companion. Relax, he whispered loudly. They regenerate, don't they? The laughter died when no one else joined in. The speaker of the Galactic Empire rose slowly, robes whispering across the floor. His species had ruled for 10,000 years, and he wore that arrogance like a second skeleton. This is most unfortunate, he began, voice smooth, rehearsed, already shaping history into something survivable. An accident. A regrettable. A human knelt beside the body. Ambassador Elias Crow moved with the careful stiffness of an old man who had survived too many wars and buried too many friends. His hair was silver, his face lined like a battlefield map. He ignored the speaker entirely. Crow placed 2 fingers against Mara Cade's neck. Nothing. For a long moment he stayed there, head bowed. When he closed her eyes, it was with a tenderness that unsettled the room more than any scream could have. That was when the human delegation stood. All of them. No weapons drawn. No shouts. Just the scrape of chairs and boots on stone. Men and women in dark suits and old uniforms, some decorated, some deliberately plain, turned as one toward the Empire's dais. The speaker hesitated. He felt it then. The shift. The invisible pressure of a predator finally deciding that the hunt was justified. Ambassador Crow rose slowly, leaning on his cane. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet enough that the chamber's translators had to amplify it. You have 1 hour, he said. The speaker blinked. Ambassador, surely. 1 hour, Crow repeated. To hand over the shooter. His commanding officer. The noble who gave the order. He paused, eyes lifting to the Emperor himself. And the Emperor who allowed this culture to fester. The chamber exploded. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Legal experts cited treaty clauses at machine gun speed. Clause 7. Subsection 12. Accidental loss of diplomatic life does not constitute casus belli. The Empire had killed envoys before, everyone had, but it had never mattered like this. The Emperor rose, ancient and enormous, his body a cathedral of augmentations and genetic vanity. You overstep, he thundered. Your species exists by our tolerance. Crow smiled. It wasn't warm. Then consider this a correction. The Emperor laughed, deep and booming. You will do nothing. The treaty binds you. Crow tapped his cane once against the floor. The sound carried. The human delegation turned and walked out. No threats. No last words. No alarms sounded as they left the hall. That was the second mistake. Mara Cade had been born long after the last human warship fired in anger. 9 centuries earlier, humanity had stood on the edge of extinction, outmatched by an empire that considered conquest a civic duty. Earth had burned. Colonies had vanished. Humanity survived not through victory, but through endurance, through the most dangerous weapon they ever forged, restraint. The treaty that followed was hailed as the end of history. Humans were allowed to exist, trade, and expand under careful supervision. No large fleets. No forbidden research. No destabilizing technologies. Humanity agreed. And remembered. Mara grew up on stories of the war, not heroic myths, but cautionary tales. She learned early that rage was easy, but patience won civilizations. She became a soldier because she understood violence, and a general because she understood people. She laughed easily, swore fluently, drank too much with admirals and listened more than she spoke. The Empire dismissed her as symbolic. A woman. A human. A diplomat in uniform. They sent her because they believed she was safe. She believed them. 2 hours after her death, the first Imperial listening post went silent. No explosion. No debris. Just darkness where a station had been. Imperial analysts blamed a system's failure. Then another post vanished. Then a trade beacon transmitted navigational data that led an entire convoy into the gravity well of a red giant. Still no declaration of war. Pirate activity spiked, and then stopped abruptly when pirates began dying to weapons that didn't match any known signature. On Earth, deep beneath mountains and oceans, doors that had not opened in centuries unlocked. Old fleets powered up. Ugly ships. Functional ships. Ships designed not to inspire awe, but terror. An admiral looked at a tactical display and whispered, "She bought us 900 years." Ambassador Crow stood alone in a dim room, staring at Mara Cade's folded coat on a steel table. Dried blood stained the fabric. "They shot you," he murmured. "Over nothing." A technician hesitated at the door. "Sir? The Empire is requesting talks." Crow didn't look up. "Tell them," he said softly, "that the hour has passed." Above Imperial space, reality began to tear. And humanity finally stopped pretending it was harmless. By the time the Empire realized humanity had left Carset Prime, it was already too late. Not for fleets. Not for colonies. Too late for their assumptions. For 900 years, the galaxy had believed humans were predictable. They followed treaties. They negotiated. They endured insults, taxes, lost colonies, and the occasional orbital bombardment without a single warlike word. They were patient. Calm. Weak, in the eyes of everyone who had never lived under Earth's sun. They had been wrong. It started small. Listening posts blinked out. Entire satellites vanished mid-orbit. Trade convoys carrying raw materials disappeared without a trace, replaced by twisted wreckage that made no sense to any known physics. The Empire muttered of glitches and natural phenomena, until the first fleet commander went missing while investigating a minor disruption in a neutral sector. His last transmission was static, then a single message, repeated 3 times. "They are already here." Humans didn't declare war. Humans didn't make demands. Humans didn't even fire their first salvo until the Empire's arrogance became unbearable. When they did, it wasn't with fleet formations. Not with coordinated hyperspace assaults. They arrived silently. Inside Imperial territory. Ships folded space around themselves, appearing where sensors were blind, moving faster than theory allowed, materializing between star systems like ghosts with rifles. And in the corridors of command vessels, human soldiers walked calmly, laughing softly as they dispatched crews with weapons that seemed simple, blunt, kinetic, archaic, but brutal beyond imagination. An officer, trembling, whispered to his superior, They're enjoying this." A human sergeant corrected him without breaking stride. "No. We're remembering. The Empire scrambled its fleets. Ancient armadas, undefeated for millennia, raced to intercept these incursions. Warships bristled with turrets, shields glowed, hyperdrives screamed. But humans didn't meet them in open space. Humans let them come. Then the ground itself betrayed the Empire. Entire orbital defenses were torn apart not by weapons, but by gravity. Humans had spent centuries secretly mastering the subtle art of space-time manipulation, folding planets and asteroids into slingshots, using physics itself as a weapon. Ships disintegrated mid-orbit as mass drivers crushed them like tin cans. Admirals stared at tactical readouts that contradicted every known principle of engineering. Commands failed. Shields overloaded. Entire fleets evaporated before a shot had been fired. And yet, humanity spared civilians. Hospitals were untouched. Food shipments continued. Refugee corridors opened automatically, precisely mapped for alien survival. A captured noble wept as a human officer approached, blade in hand. "Why?" he sobbed. "Why are you letting us live?" The human leaned close. Her eyes were cold gray, unflinching. "Because we're not like you," she said. "But we will make sure you remember." By the 10th day, every major imperial system had been touched by humans. Not in conquest, but in correction. A single broadcast hijacked every imperial comm channel. The face of Ambassador Crow appeared, calm and measured, Mara Cade's blood-stained coat folded neatly on the table beside him. "You shot our general," he said quietly, "and you broke a promise older than your empire. You mistook our patience for weakness. You will learn why humanity survives, why we endure, and why we do not forgive." The Empire laughed. The Emperor himself chuckled, convinced that fear would buy time. That was the third mistake. Humans laughed back. Not with joy. Not with victory. But with precision, with remembrance. They were laughing at history itself. At centuries of insult and oversight. At the arrogance of species who thought treaties and symbols could restrain a living, remembering race. The first human fleet, a dozen blackened, asymmetrical ships, slid into imperial space. No grand formations, no shields blazing, no fanfare. Just quiet, ugly, lethal vessels that bent reality around themselves, appearing directly inside the Empire's strongest defensive perimeter. Before a single alarm could sound, human marines had boarded command vessels. They didn't yell battle cries. They knocked politely before entering, as though visiting an old, indebted neighbor. Then they killed efficiently. And they left, taking only the prisoners, leaving entire fleets destroyed but civilian populations untouched. Imperial commanders wept at the screens. They had been taught that humans were fragile, predictable. That humanity was something to be controlled or ignored. They had underestimated patience. They had underestimated memory. And most of all, they had underestimated rage. On the 21st day, the Emperor surrendered. Humble, broken, augmented body trembling under centuries of arrogance. He knelt before Crow, expecting mercy. Crow placed Mara Cade's coat on the floor between them. "She stood here," he said, voice steady. "Unarmed, trusting you. And you failed her." The Emperor's voice broke. We will rebuild the treaty. We will honor her memory. We will." Crow cut him off. "No. You will live. You will remember. You will teach your children what you did. Humanity will not exterminate you. We are far more patient than that. But we will ensure that the lesson is never forgotten." Every imperial world immediately received human teachers, human archives, human history, uncensored. Every atrocity, every miscalculation, every lie, translated for all eyes and ears. "You will survive," Crow said softly. "But you will know why you deserve to fail." And across the galaxy, the whispers began. Humanity had smiled in diplomacy. Humanity had been mocked, overlooked, and tested. But when peace failed them, humanity remembered. And the galaxy would never forget again. The galaxy thought it understood war. Humans had been at the edge of extinction 9 centuries ago, and every empire believed that time had tempered them into something soft, predictable, patient, careful. They were wrong. By the time the empire realized humanity had returned, the humans were already inside their borders. Not in formation, not with heralds or trumpets, but like shadows folding space itself, appearing aboard command vessels, inside orbital shipyards, in the streets of imperial capitals. No one expected the humans to fight like predators who had been held back for centuries. The first contact on the planet Gvor Prime was described by survivors as a lesson in terror. Human soldiers emerged from twisted alleys, black combat suits absorbing light, rifles silent, faces painted with mud and starlight. They didn't shout. They didn't charge in waves. They walked. They moved like inevitability. And then, when fired upon, they answered with old Terran weapons, blunt, physical, utterly devastating in confined spaces. Blades sliced through exoskeletons, slug throwers shredded armor, fists crushed skulls. Every movement was precise, every kill efficient. In one command tower, a four-armed general barely escaped with his life. He had led fleets that had annihilated entire human colonies centuries before. Now, he watched helplessly as humans dismantled his men piece by piece, laughing quietly as they worked. "They're enjoying this," he whispered to his aide. The aide flinched as a human sergeant crouched nearby, her weapon raised. "No," she corrected. "We're remembering." Humanity had spent centuries perfecting revenge without losing control, perfecting war while pretending it didn't exist. The Empire had mocked human technology as archaic, their weapons primitive, their tactics clumsy. They had joked about humans fighting with muscle and stubbornness, instead of fleets and shields. Now they understood the joke had been on them. Entire fleets folded under human ingenuity. Massive Imperial dreadnoughts disintegrated in orbit when human mass drivers, ships designed not to fire, but to warp gravity itself, pulled them into micro-singularities. Hyperdrives overloaded, energy shields collapsed, fleets collided mid-space. Ships built to last thousands of years were shredded in minutes. Admirals screamed into dead calms, demanding explanations while their officers died around them. And still, civilians survived. Entire cities remained untouched. Hospitals, water purification systems, schools, they were preserved, repaired, and maintained even as the Empire's war machine crumbled around them. Captured nobles begged for mercy. "Why?" one cried, chains biting his wrists. "Why spare us? Why not destroy all we built?" A human officer leaned close, eyes gray and hard as obsidian. "Because we're not like you. But you will learn. Every child, every citizen will remember. You will live in the memory of what you did, and that will be your punishment." By the 10th day of the campaign, the Emperor realized he had misjudged humans. They were not merely clever. They were patient, relentless, and terrifyingly intelligent. Every assault the Empire planned was anticipated. Every fleet they dispatched was countered. Humans did not attack blindly. They shaped battlefields, controlled timelines, and turned physics itself into a weapon. Ships didn't explode, they vanished, folding into space-time in ways that defied theory. Soldiers didn't charge. They appeared where the Empire was weakest, cutting corridors like scalpel lines through the body of the military. Every Imperial victory, every tactic, every advantage was stripped away before it could matter. The Emperor surrendered on the 21st day. He was ancient, augmented, convinced he was untouchable. He had ruled an empire longer than many species had existed. And yet he knelt, trembling, before Ambassador Crow. Crow placed Mara Cade's blood-stained coat on the floor between them. "She trusted you," he said softly. "You failed her. Humanity does not forgive. We remember. And we will ensure the galaxy remembers, too." Imperial worlds were immediately flooded with human teachers, archives, and historians. Every atrocity, every misstep, every lie meticulously catalogued and translated into every language spoken in the Empire. Human children taught alien children. Libraries were built, museums established, and the record of the Empire's failures became as inescapable as gravity itself. "You will survive," Crow said to the Emperor. "But you will know why you deserve to fail. And your children will know as well." And then, with that, humanity withdrew. Not because they were done, they never were, but because their point had been made. Civilization could survive. Peace could be enforced. But no empire would ever again mistake patience for weakness. The Emperor collapsed into his throne, trembling beneath centuries of arrogance, staring at Mara Cade's coat. For the first time in his life, he understood the truth. Humans were not just fighters. They were memory incarnate. And vengeance, when measured over centuries, was unstoppable. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Humanity remembered. Humanity waited. Humanity acted. And in that knowledge, even the proudest fleets of the Empire trembled. 900 years of peace had ended with a gunshot. But the lesson humanity delivered? That would echo forever. The galaxy held its breath as humanity withdrew. Not with fanfare, not with conquest, not even with a declaration of victory. Just silence. Ships that had bent space itself returned to their secret harbors, fleets that had seemed unstoppable vanished into the void, and humans, those who had been underestimated for centuries, walked among the remnants of empires as though nothing had happened. On the imperial capital of Ikor, the Emperor stared at Mara Cade's folded coat. His advisors wept. Officers trembled. Citizens whispered of humans like ghosts that could bend the universe to their will. And the Emperor understood something terrifying. He had survived, but his empire had been broken, not by firepower, but by memory, patience, and the cold certainty of humanity. Ambassador Crow did not gloat. He never did. He had executed a war of principle, a war of remembrance. He had restored balance without slaughtering innocents unnecessarily. And yet, the weight of the human message was absolute. Trust humanity at your peril, but respect them, or the consequences would echo across centuries. Imperial children woke to human teachers in their classrooms. History lessons replaced propaganda. For the first time, the Empire's subjects were taught the truth about their rulers. The manipulation, the betrayals, the arrogance. Every atrocity catalogued. Every lie exposed. Every life of a human lost remembered. Crow watched the Emperor stumble through the halls of power, overwhelmed, broken, and haunted. He leaned on his cane and spoke softly, though the Emperor could hear him clearly. "Your people will remember Mara Cade. Your species will live, yes, but through the lens of what you allowed to happen. That is a punishment far more enduring than death." The Emperor wanted to reply, to bargain, to plead, but no words could reverse the lesson. Every fleet, every weapon, every treaty was now filtered through a human lens of accountability. The galaxy itself had been reshaped, not with conquest, but with morality enforced through fear and respect. Back on Earth, a quiet cemetery overlooked the ocean. A single stone bore her name: General Mara Cade. She kept the peace, until peace failed her. Soldiers, diplomats, and civilians alike visited the grave. They placed small stones, pens, medals, or a folded piece of uniform. Mara Cade's life had been a warning to humans and aliens alike. Peace was fragile, and respect was not optional. The galaxy learned that lesson quickly. Humans still smiled in diplomacy, still signed treaties, still shook alien hands with warm eyes. But now the universe understood the weight behind that smile. It carried patience measured in centuries, vengeance stored like energy in the void, and the cold, undeniable truth that humanity never forgot. Empires rebuilt, trade resumed, fleets reassembled, but every corner of the stars bore the memory of what happened when the Galactic Empire shot a woman general and assumed humanity would do nothing. And humanity waited. Always waiting. Watching. Remembering. 900 years of peace had ended with a gunshot. But the memory of that day ensured that humanity's warning would echo through the stars for 1,000 more. The galaxy had survived. The humans had won. And in the silence between worlds, everyone, every species, knew this truth. Peace with humanity is not a gift. It is a warning,